Hey everybody, welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. The new digs here, a beautiful place, and happy to have you along for the afternoon. We have a very special guest now, and I think I can say, yeah, officially I'm giddy that we have this guest. We have with us at the moment Tim Janssen. He is the attorney for Brian Winchester. We know him from the testimony we just recapped. We know him from the trial that ended last Friday night in the conviction against his former girlfriend, former wife. Tim, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. And, you know, everybody, whether sitting in this chair, across the way as a guest, people viewing, people in the profession talking about it, had one huge question on their minds. And I'm going to ask you that question now, and maybe you can make everybody understand. Well, how in the heck did you get the immunity deal for your client, Brian Winchester?
Well, it was not easy, and it wasn't planned. You have to remember, I was representing him on the kidnapping case, and we were preparing for trial for the kidnapping case, and then some unfortunate evidence was brought to my attention in that case that would have affected his ultimate ability to get a trial and maybe a sentencing. So at that point, in doing this for many years, I've been doing this for 31 years, the state said there was no plea agreement, no plea offer. Which even in all cases, you have bad plea offers and you have, but never no plea offers. So the state decided that they wanted information. And so they were playing coy. I played coy. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And it continued on. And then finally they had come up to us and said, well, if he gives us information about Mike Williams, we might be interested in working out a resolution.
Now, by way of background, I should have gotten into this with a little more detail. This agreement effectively allowed your client to testify, and unless he lied during that testimony, he could say, as he did, that he killed the victim in this case, the husband of the defendant, Denise Williams. And as we started to hear his testimony unfold, bit by bit, gruesome detail by gruesome detail, we just kept wondering, you know, how can the guy get off the hook completely? How is the jury going to deal with that information? And again, as I said, how did his attorney manufacture such a sweetheart deal? Now, you're suggesting that maybe it was the only thing they had to work with. Would there be a case against Denise Williams had it not been for the agreement you crafted?
Well, I think that's correct. I think there would still, Mike Williams' body would still be missing. No one would have been charged with the crime. There would have been no trial. We wouldn't be talking about it. His mother would be having the anniversary. There'd be an article written in the paper about Mike Williams being missing. But for what Mr. Winchester and the deal that I negotiated on behalf of Mr. Winchester.
And that deal ultimately gives him a max of 20 years based on the kidnapping charge, a related series of events, but total immunity from anything related to the killing of the victim in this case, correct?
Well, it's a little different, and it's complicated, and I watched the trial. I heard the lawyers say it's immunity. It's not really immunity. He didn't get 20 years for his testimony in this case. We were going to trial on his battery kidnapping case. The trial was coming up. They had some evidence that he may have tried to obstruct justice by getting a witness. This proffer agreement basically said they could not ask for a life sentence. They couldn't introduce anything in front of Judge Hankinson regarding Wade Wilson obstruction, and that they would agree to continue the trial, and that Hankinson would not know about any of this stuff other than that there was a proffer agreement. And then we pled straight up to the court. We pled open to the court, and Denise Williams came in and asked for a life sentence, and the state came in and asked for 45. He scored like 8 years with the 10-year minimum mandatory, and there was 15 years was recommended by the probation department, and Judge Hankinson sentenced him to 20 years.
Now, this kidnapping, not a traditional kidnapping as we might envision one. Describe what you learned about that crime and how maybe that impacted what was effectively a lesser sentence than he certainly could have gotten.
Well, we were planning on going to trial, and we believe we had enough information. Credibility of Denise was a little shoddy. Her description of events was shoddy. There was no gun found. And then we had one information, and this is probably the most key part of the trial, was a testimony of Dr. Mnookin. Now, my client, after this incident had occurred, he went and tried to see a doctor. He couldn't see him, so he met with Dr. Mnookin. Denise had already convinced him that she wasn't going to the police, so he meets with Dr. Mnookin, and he's a doctor. He says, "Is this patient privilege?" And he said yes. And at that time, he described what he did, but more importantly, he described why he did it. And he said because he was afraid Denise was going to talk about what happened to her husband 18 years ago. And this was crucial because the defense wanted to play that he only made all this up because she came in and asked for a life sentence. And when Brian said this, he thought it was protected, and he didn't even know she was going to the police at that time.
Well, certainly key to the whole analysis, both on the legal front and for the jurors, was, what was the motivation for him to tell this story if it wasn't the truth? That's the bottom line. And yet you have, and we're going to hear Brian Winchester's testimony right now on cross, you have him admitting, hey, I'm a liar, I'm a killer, and I'm a liar. Let's hear what he had to say during that testimony.
Arrangement with Wade Wilson.
Yes, sir.
And at that point in time, after learning of the arrangement with Wade Wilson, that scared you even more than facing disarmed kidnapping charges, because now you were tampering with witnesses.
Yes, sir. Lying was just making things worse for me.
And you knew you were looking at life in prison.
I was already facing life in prison, but
It was getting worse.
it was getting worse.
You had a very firm judge, didn't you?
Hangman Hankinson, yes, sir.
I'm not going to comment on that. But you knew that things in your situation, not only from the armed kidnapping, but now with the witness tampering and obstruction of justice, it had gotten worse.
Yes, sir. Lying was making things worse.
So in October of 2017, this proffer agreement is negotiated.
Okay.
Well,
I don't remember the exact dates, but yes, there was a proffer agreement that came about.
to try to help yourself out of the situation that you had put yourself in with the armed kidnapping and with the obstruction of justice, you give to the state information related to where they can find the body of Mike Williams.
I was asked to provide any and all information that I knew about the Mike Williams case in exchange for the things that you talked about earlier.
And you got the benefits that we talked about earlier, but you got one more benefit, didn't you? You got the benefit of seeing Denise Williams arrested, locked up, and brought to trial.
That's not a benefit.
You got the revenge for her putting you in the same situation you wanted to put her in.
No, sir. I wouldn't want to put anybody in this situation. She got herself in this situation.
Well, you would put your sister in the situation of tampering with witnesses.
I asked her for help. Yes, sir.
You would put Kim Adams in the situation of tampering with witnesses.
Yes, sir.
You have a history of trying to plant evidence. You put a fake hat out at the crime scene where you shot Mike Williams in 2001, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Winchester, you're a murderer, isn't it true?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Winchester, you're a liar, isn't it true?
Yes, sir.
That's Brian Winchester on cross-examination in the case against him for the murder of his best friend and his former wife, former girlfriend. He's on the stand testifying, though, with a proffer under his belt, which basically says he's not going to be prosecuted for killing his best friend. Tim Janssen, via Skype, is his attorney. I have to tell you, there was one moment there in his testimony, Tim, where I felt like, I wish he hadn't said that. When he has the nickname for the judge, I'm not sure the jury likes to hear a guy so close with the criminal system that he has a nickname for the judge. But nonetheless, you're in Tallahassee, been there a long time, been working a long time. Did your reputation and your efforts in that community help you get this deal for your guy?
Well, I think that knowing that this unsolved murder was out there, knowing that we had a newly elected state attorney who wanted to break this case. The original proffer agreement they sent us was like what we say at Christmas time. You give more than you get. So we made changes. We covered every angle we could cover, everything we could think of. No derivative use. If any portion of the agreement was he deemed to be untruthful, only that portion could be used against him. But basically anything that he gave them, which was including the body, could not be used against him at all. So with those guarantees, we signed and executed the agreement, and he sat down for the proffer agreement with the state.
Without his testimony, without that agreement, is Mike Williams' body found at all?
I would imagine probably not. That's a guess.
Yeah,
Hasn't been found at 18 years.
Yeah, he did a good job hiding it, that's for sure. Tim Janssen, thank you so much. Appreciate your time and your efforts. Like Brian Winchester, dislike Brian Winchester, I think nobody can dispute you did one heck of a job representing him and getting him the deal that you did. I appreciate it. Again, thank you.
Well, we solved the case, and a lot of families in this tragic situation have some closure.
Very good. Thank you, sir. We're going to switch gears now and move on to another one of our love-based trials. I believe we're going to take a break first, though, before we get back into that, and we'll be back with more on the Law and Crime Network.